Good evening to our viewers around the world, and welcome once again to another insightful chat. Hopefully will trigger a lot of questions, give you some insights. The idea is for you to gain some greater clarity after you finish than when you started. We have tonight, once again, our scholar in residence, Rabbi Manis Friedman, acclaimed author, social philosopher, and public speaker, probably sitting on Zoom quite often, talking to literally thousands, tens of thousands of people around the world, making the most of the current situation. The series tonight is titled Spiritual Zone, where we're covering, it's a 5-part series, covering character traits, primary character traits from a Jewish mystical perspective. The title tonight, the subject tonight, is Healthy Indulgence or Addiction. So before we begin, I think it's important to clarify the terminology. So Rabbi, question number 1, what's your definition of the word indulgence?
If we need to if we need to explain that, we're in big trouble. Indulgence means following the dictates of your pleasures. Sometimes you follow the dictates of your thinking, sometimes of your emotions, sometimes of your pleasures. Indulgence means letting your pleasure dictate your behavior.
Rabbi, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Very, very succinct. What would you say, is there a difference between the word addiction and indulgence, or is it more of the same?
In the strictest sense of the word, no behavior is an addiction as long as you enjoy it. Addiction would be when you continue a behavior after there is no pleasure in it.
Okay.
But as long as you're enjoying it, why are you looking for a reason? You got the reason. You're enjoying it. It doesn't need any title. So an addiction is only if you continue a behavior when you no longer enjoy it. It's a desperation. It may even be painful, and you can't stop.
So let's say you're eating and you enjoy your food, and you enjoy it so much that you want some more.
Then you're a glutton, not an addict.
So at what point, or what is the framework, or where do you draw the line between let's say, a healthy indulgence, if there can be something like healthy indulgence, and where it becomes unhealthy?
That is a very good question. The truth is that anything that can become too much of a good thing probably wasn't a very good thing to begin with. How is it possible for something to be good? You do it again, it's good. You do it again, it's good. You do it again, not so good. Too much of a good thing. How does that happen? If it's a good thing, then the more you have of it, the better. So how can any good turn bad and suddenly it's too much of a good thing? Like, for example, can you love your children too much? Of course not. How can loving your children not be good? Of course, the problem is, if the only feeling you have and the only gift you give your children is love, that's a very narrow diet. So only love is not a good thing. But more love is bad? Never. So to say you love your children too much? No such thing. You love your children and nothing else No, that's not good. It's not a balanced diet. Children need discipline. Children need some criticism. Children need a healthy balance. But there's never too much love. So when does a good thing become bad? Only if there was something bad about it to begin with. Like an ice cream. One ice cream, it's not the best thing in the world, but the pleasure far outweighs the consequence. But 3 ice creams, the negative part of it is becoming a little too much. And the pleasure does no longer outweigh the price you're going to pay. So only something that has a subtle, unhealthy side to it can eventually become too much of a good thing. So every indulgence is bad, subtly. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But if you continue it, it's going to get out of hand.
Can I stop you right there, just to clarify one point, and that is, what about eating a nice piece of meat on Shabbos? Isn't that a mitzvah?
Shabbos?
Yeah. Eating a nice piece of meat on Shabbos.
Yes. Yotzos chore behefseidei. You're going to pay a price for it, and it may not be worth it. So look, every person who smokes agrees wholeheartedly that chain smoking is terrible. 3 packs a day, terrible. They all agree. So why don't they stop? Every alcoholic tells you getting drunk, terrible. So why don't they stop? For a very practical, simple reason. They're convinced that 3 packs a day is too much. They're not convinced that 1 cigarette is bad. The alcoholic is not convinced that 1 drink is bad. Sure, getting drunk is bad. He has no intention of getting drunk. He's just going to have 1 drink. And if that 1 drink is not terrible, then how terrible can it be to have another one? By him, 1 + 1 = 1. By the smoker, 1 cigarette and another cigarette is 1 cigarette. In order for them to stop, they have to be thoroughly convinced that 1 cigarette is bad. And that's why 3 packs is bad l'cholades. Once you get to the 3-pack level, then the evil of that first cigarette becomes obvious. When you get drunk, now you know that that first drink was not pure good. It may seem harmless, but certainly not pure good. That first ice cream was not pure good. That's why the 3rd one is starting to look pretty bad. So what's a healthy indulgence? An indulgence that you are mindful and thoughtful about. You're keeping your head. I know what I'm doing. It's going to be 1 drink or 1 cigarette or 1 ice cream. But I'm not going to become a slave to my pleasures. And that's what happens. You indulge your pleasure when it's kosher. Eventually, it becomes so demanding that you can't control it anymore. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the Yetzer Hara becomes encouraged and emboldened every time you eat. Every time you do what you feel like doing, the animal soul becomes more of a dictator. You're feeding its arrogance. And then it starts demanding things like it's God. So if you're thoughtful about your pleasures, Chabad, if your mind is the final decider and not the pleasure, then you're okay. But if pleasure becomes its own dictator, that's out of control.
Okay, so it comes back to control, mind over heart. That seems to be the solution to all the problems. First, let's talk a little about that, because there seems to be a view, and I'm moving here to what's referred to as OCD, obsessive compulsive disorders. There seems to be a view that people are born with a predisposition to OCD. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not professional on this, but it seems that there are two kinds of obsession. One is medical, and the other is habitual. Some people become obsessive simply because of habit. They've indulged for so long, they cannot imagine not doing it. So now it controls them. But that's the power of habit. Maybe we should call that nurture rather than nature. But then there are children who are born obsessive compulsive. They didn't even have time to indulge long enough to develop a habit. That's nature rather than nurture. That's obviously much harder to, no one would say, try harder, try harder. If you really want to, you can stop. No, you can't. But the nurture one, the obsessive compulsive behavior that comes from habit, if you're really determined, you can stop it. Because maybe not by yourself. You need support, but let's make a distinction between heart and pleasure. Pleasure is not an activity of the heart. Emotions are in the heart. Pleasure is not an emotion. Passion is not an emotion. That's why when people refer to intimacy as making love, that is such a distortion, that's so confusing. Love is an emotion, passion is not. I guess in very simple language, you can do anything passionately. So there's love, you can love passionately. There's hate, you can hate passionately. You can be a doctor and treat patients, and you can do it passionately. So passion is not any one emotion or any one thought or concept. It applies to everything. So, for example, what is the difference between love and passion? Love and pleasure. One practical difference, love being an emotion is a pursuit. Every emotion is a bridge between one person and another. You cannot call the love of nature, you can't really call it love. Because it's not a relationship. Nature doesn't love you back, according to most opinions. Some people say the universe will pay you back. The universe will respond. I don't know what that means. Love is an emotion. Emotions are interpersonal. Sadness, for example, is not an emotion. It's just a condition you find yourself in. It has nothing to do with another person. So sadness is a sensation, not an emotion. So all emotions are pursuit. I pursue something. I'm reacting to you. I'm responding to you. Love is the pursuit of closeness. Fear is the pursuit of distance. I want to get away. In other words, every emotion has an objective. Pleasure, on the other hand, is not a pursuit, and it has no objective. This gives me pleasure. I'm not pursuing anything. Like one of the differences between love and pleasure, absence makes the heart grow fonder. When I'm far away from the person I love him more. But when I'm far away from what gives me pleasure, I don't get more pleasure. If I don't have chocolate, it doesn't give me more pleasure, it gives me agony. Only when I have the chocolate do I feel pleasure. But absence of chocolate does not make the pleasure increase. So when we say the mind governs the heart, that's a very different subject. That's talking about emotions. Now, you can love someone or not love someone depending on your mind. What your mind tells you about that person will determine whether you love him or hate him. Your mind cannot tell you what's pleasurable. If chocolate tastes good, it tastes good, no matter what my mind says. In other words, pleasure is higher than intelligence, cannot be controlled by the mind. The indulgence can be controlled, not the pleasure. So I can either eat the chocolate or not eat the chocolate, but chocolate is pleasurable. There's nothing I can do about it. Unless I'm one of those weird people who prefer vanilla. But then again, they can't control it either. So, applying it to practical life. You can sin because your mind tells you to. Your mind justifies the sin. It's good, it's beneficial, it's not so terrible. When other people do it, it's horrible. When I do it, it's cute. Your mind can do all sorts of tricks to justify a sin. Even your will can justify a sin. I know it's wrong. My mind isn't playing any games. I'm not going to justify it or say that it's not a sin. It is a sin, but I'm going to do it because I want to. And what do you mean I can't do what I want? I want. And if I want, I do. It's wrong? I don't care. I want to. I cannot say no to my own want. Even that a person can control. So now imagine a person is tempted to sin. His mind says no, not good. Even his will is ready to surrender to God's will. Yes, I want to. But if God doesn't want, or even with another human being, your wife doesn't want to go on this vacation, even though you do want to go. And that doesn't happen. You don't want to go, and your wife does want to go. So you surrender your will to your wife's will. So you can surrender your will for the sin and not sin. but there's no way you can change the fact that the sin is pleasurable. So you decide you're not going to eat this non-kosher, delicious smelling piece of meat, even though you want to. But God doesn't want you to. So you don't. But then somebody comes along and tells you that it's kosher. So you eat it unintentionally. Is it going to taste good? Of course it'll taste good. You can't change that. You're not obligated to change that. The Torah doesn't tell you not to feel the pleasure. It tells you not to do it, not to even want to do it. But if somebody pushes the piece of meat into your mouth, of course it's going to taste good. Now, there are people who blame themselves for that. They feel guilty for enjoying it. That's not kosher. You cannot take the blame for how the meat tastes. You're not a perfect tzaddik. The perfect tzaddik will not enjoy it. It will not taste good. But that's a different species of human being. We are not obligated for that. So what do? We stay away from those pleasures that are forbidden. But not be pleasurable? Don't be ridiculous.
Right. Let me interject, and on a practical level, please take us through the process, the thought process. When you come to, you're sitting down for a Shabbos meal. I'll go back to Shabbos again because that's the hybrid. We're encouraged to celebrate Shabbos, to be joyous on Shabbos. We're encouraged to buy the best foods that we can afford. So we buy the best wine over which we sanctify the day. We buy the best foods and we eat. And we are supposed, as you say, the meal, the experience is pleasurable. The question is, at what point or how do we approach that experience? On the one hand, we're told to enjoy, we're told the food is a pleasurable experience. At the same time, we don't want to cross the line where the pleasure becomes an indulgence. In other words, as you explained before, the indulgence takes over and it has nothing to do with the mitzvah anymore. So in a way, it would be easier not to eat at all, or not good foods anyway.
I think most people eat cholent only because they have to.
Manis,
right? Do you ever see anybody eat cholent during the week? Never.
There are places in the world where they do Thursday night.
I know, and that's out of control. Okay. Some places they actually have, instead of an ice cream truck, an ice cream, what do they call it in England? What do they call a truck? A lorry?
Lorry, yeah, good.
So instead of an ice cream lorry, they actually have a cholent lorry driving up and down the street selling cholent to kids. That's child abuse. Anyway, so you're absolutely right. The objective is to eat in honor of Shabbos, to make Shabbos enjoyable, not the food. But you want the body to participate in the joy of Shabbos. So you give it something special. But it's not the food you're supposed to enjoy, it's the Shabbos. When it stops being about Shabbos, then it's just gluttony. And gluttony means too controlled by pleasure. Mindless pleasure, that's gluttony. Pleasure for the sake of pleasure. That can become addictive. Until you go to somebody's house and eat a bad cholent, and then you're cured.
Okay, following on this subject, because I think we're trying to get to a point here and also provide some guidance, practical guidance. You see, it all starts with, in just eating foods, enjoying the food, and then slowly but surely we get taken over by the pleasure until, as you suggest, the pleasure takes control over us. My question is, what goes wrong? Is there something in particular? Is this a symptom of a deeper problem as to why people lose control, don't watch what they eat too much, eat the wrong foods? What generally is the weakness that creates this loss of control?
Well, if you want to go really philosophical about it,
Human
beings
and practical.
Yeah, human beings have a very deep need to justify their existence. Like they call it existential angst. I need to justify my existence. Why that is a fascinating subject, but let's stick to the topic. The need to justify my existence. One of the ways I can placate that need is to experience pleasure. When I experience pleasure, I feel okay with my existence. Of course, eventually you're going to have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of the pleasure? But for the moment, the pleasure satisfies that empty feeling that I exist for no purpose. It's another form of distraction or diversion, like entertainment. Takes my mind off the big question that never goes away. Why am I here? So pleasure is one of the big band-aids on that painful question. So when I indulge in pleasure, when something gives me pleasure, it feels like life is okay. The more desperate we become to answer the question of why am I here, the more desperately we're going to pursue pleasure. So all addiction, I think, all addiction is a response to this question, why am I here? The addiction that is, and most addictions are, the addiction that is dangerous, fatal eventually, is the attempt to destroy that question by destroying the self. If I can't find an answer to why I'm here, then I shouldn't be here. So I start to destroy myself. Thinking that if I destroy myself, that question will stop. In other words, a human being cannot stand a purposeless existence. So either I find a purpose or I got to destroy my existence. Many, many years ago, when I first went out to Minnesota as a shliach, I was 22. Middle-aged people were coming to me for advice. And I'm a naive yeshiva boy. What do I know? This woman comes to me and says, I'm going to kill myself. Life is meaningless. Nothing has any meaning. It's all vain and empty. I'm going to kill myself. And she had a plan. She was planning to kill herself.
Did she tell you why?
Huh?
Did she tell you why?
Did she say why?
Yes.
Because life is meaningless. So, being a smart aleck, I said to her, really? Life is meaningless? She said, yes. Nothing has any meaning? Nothing means anything? No. I said, well, in that case, why do you have to kill yourself? Sit quietly, eventually you'll die. It helped. She's still alive today. If everything is meaningless, so hang around. But you have to kill yourself? It's not that meaningful. No, you kill yourself over something meaningful. If it's all meaningless, sit, grow old, and die naturally. What's the rush to kill yourself? So I learned something. If a person cannot find a purpose for their existence, they cannot tolerate existing. It's a uniquely human feature. If I don't have a purpose for being here, then I cannot be here. To be here for no purpose? See, that's that famous story about the chassid who the Alter Rebbe gave a blessing for long life. And what was the chassid's response? Not if I'm just going to hang around doing nothing. No, thank you. That's torture. So it tortures us to exist without a purpose. All addiction is an attempt to kill that feeling because I can't stand it. I can't stand being me with no content to the me. So either give me content or kill the me. Destroy the ego. So addiction really is a destructive process, almost intentionally. When you tell somebody there is purpose to your life, there is meaning to your existence, there's a chance you can pull them out of the addiction. And I think that that's why AA is so effective. They don't just tell you not to drink. They tell you what your life should be. Now you've got a reason to live. So all indulgence is a Band-Aid on this empty feeling. Addiction is the desperate attempt to kill it because the Band-Aid doesn't work anymore.
Let's move to a different manifestation of this addiction, something more contemporary and unfortunately pervasive today, regarding social media and all its variations. This seems to be extremely addictive, especially amongst young people, in a way that takes over their lives completely. How do you see the destructiveness of that way of life?
The destructiveness of
that way of life. I mean, let's analyze the problem.
Well, any way of life is a philosophy. It's a shita. At least it's an attempt at formulating some kind of meaning. Of course, in the end, it'll turn out to be meaningless. And then there's the danger of total collapse and hopelessness. But one of the addictions that we hardly ever talk about that is really, really bad is the addiction to love. It is an addiction for many people. It's a passion for some, it's an addiction for others. The desperate need for love, for which people will do all sorts of ridiculously dangerous things just to gain love. Who was it, the guy who shot President Reagan? He did it to impress his girlfriend, hoping his girlfriend will love him. And she wasn't even his girlfriend. He just wanted her to be his girlfriend. All right, so that, that's already off the beaten track. That's crazy behavior. But there are many things, dangerous things that teenagers particular will do just to get love.
So, Rabbi, if I can ask you, if you can just clarify in succinctly, healthy love, and at what point it becomes obsessive. So people should know what line not to cross.
There is a natural instinct of love, and then there is the hyped love. Every movie, every play, every opera, every drama, every novel, every magazine hypes love. It has become so exaggerated that it has become the definition of life. Give me love or give me death. Paraphrasing. It's horrible for two reasons. First of all, hyped love isn't even love. It's a Hollywood version of love. Secondly, love is not the answer to life. It's not. It's not meant to be. All you need is love? That's not true. We confuse love with purpose. I want my life to be meaningful. So if I have love, it's meaningful. No, it's not. Because love itself needs meaning. Love does not impart meaning. So what teenagers are really looking for is not to be loved, but to be needed. The problem with not having a purpose is that you're not necessary. The solution is to discover how and where you are necessary. Love doesn't make you necessary. So we're confusing the need for love with the need to be necessary. And if I don't feel necessary, no amount of love is going to help. So it's a fool's errand to look for love, to find love, true love, whatever that means, as if there's a fake version. So if you look at all the addictions, they have one thing in common. They're not necessary. Alcohol is not necessary. If it didn't exist in the world, there'd be nothing missing. Gambling, totally unnecessary. You don't need this. Drugs, if they didn't exist in the world, it'd be fine. The one exception is food. Overeaters Anonymous. That's a tricky one because food is necessary. So that's the hardest to even rationalize. But interestingly, there are people who are anorexic. They hate food. There's nobody who hates alcohol. They may not like it, but nobody is like turned off. Anorexics are turned off to food. So with food, we have a very strange relationship. It's love-hate. I love it, I hate it. I'm eating, but I don't want to. I'm dieting, but I hate it. Trying to eat healthy, but I'm not enjoying it. So it's very complex, this food business. And that's why there are so many mitzvahs concerning food or eating, the bracha before, the bracha after, what you can eat, how you should eat, how much you should eat. So the real dangerous addiction for teenagers today is love. Because they'll do anything for love. They'll kill for it. And they'll die for it. And like all other addictions, it is not necessary. You can live life unloved, but you cannot live life unnecessary.
Rabbi, let me come in at this point because you've explained very well that the underlying cause for all addictions is that feeling, the underlying cause of all addictions is that feeling of being unnecessary, okay? Which means if we solve that problem, or if people understood and recognized the cause and attempted to solve that problem, most of these addictions would disappear. My question to you is, why is it that today in this modern world, so many people feel unnecessary? And my second question is, how do we even attempt to change that?
Let's start at the very beginning. Do you need God or does God need you? That's all we ever need to discuss. Because if we can answer that question correctly, you have a new lease on life.
Rabbi, if I can just stop you there, let's try and adopt language that speaks to the masses, okay? So let's pretend you have 5 minutes to talk to all teenagers that have a Facebook or an Instagram account. What would you say to them to address this question? And remember, quite a few don't believe in God, or that's what they profess.
So I would ask them this. Do you need evolution or does evolution need you? And they would say, evolution doesn't need anything. Bingo. If you need evolution and evolution doesn't need anything, you're doomed. It's a dead-end road. That's why you cannot believe in evolution. You can study it. You can even agree with it. You can't believe it. You can't worship it because it does not give you life. God, on the other hand, does. So basically, the point is the only answer is God. We've tried everything else, and it failed. So get with the program. You can't skip God and find meaning in life. Can't. We've really tried, really. For 3,000 years, we've tried every alternative. Today, I think people are ready to admit none of it worked, including other opinions about God. The opinion that you need God and God doesn't need you is a total failure. It's a disaster. It just makes you weaker. It makes you more dependent. It makes you more depressed. It makes you more helpless. It's a bad message. And yet people consider that to be the primary message of religion is how dependent you are, how helpless you are. So I got to tell you, there's a famous actor, very arrogant guy. He was addicted to smoking and he wanted to stop. So somebody suggested that he call AA or SA. So he calls. He says, you have any health treatment for smoking? And they said, yes. But the first thing is you have to admit that you're helpless. You cannot stop by yourself. He said, what? And he stopped smoking. His ego was stronger than his addiction. He said, I can't. And he stopped. So that message, you can't help yourself, you're dependent on God, it's not a good message. I mean, it may even be true. It is true. But what kind of message is that? So that's what motivates your life, your helplessness? It backfires. It makes people very religious and dependent and helpless, or it makes people reject religion. Either way is not good. So the message for today is one very simple thing to every teenager in the world. This life you have is not about you. Stop trying to make it work for you. It's not about you. You are necessary, you're indispensable to the creator of the universe. Try it. Stop looking for someone to give you and become the giver yourself. Give God what God needed, for which reason he created you. And see what that does. See how that brings purpose, meaning, direction, enthusiasm to your existence. And you don't need band-aids, and you don't need to kill yourself. It all makes sense. It all fits. Intuitively, not by faith. It feels right, and you know you're on the right track. And that's better than something you do that feels good. Feeling good is not what you're looking for. You're looking for that which feels right. Then you can go have some fun.
So on a practical level, following that thought, again, you've still got the audience that we spoke about before. what do you tell them to do on a practical level? What should a day in their life look like?
So start with the basic principles. God wants life on earth to be healthy and pleasurable. Look around. The people you know, the people in your neighborhood, the people in your family. Are they healthy? Are they enjoying? And if not, what can you do to help? Be the giver, not the taker. Stop looking for a savior. Become the savior. So start with people. Of course, God needs you ultimately, but there are people who need you too. And God needs you to help those people. Because anything you can do to make life on earth better, who benefits? The creator of the earth. So start small. Look around, see what you can do to help people in little ways that make a big difference. Encouraging people, paying attention to people who feel neglected. Now you can say, well, I feel neglected. So what do you want to do? Become dependent, more dependent? Don't go that way. Yes, you feel ignored, you feel snubbed. You know why? So that you can be sympathetic to others who feel that way and do something about it. Guaranteed to make your life livable.
Is that a part-time job, your suggestion of being the giver, or is it a full-time job?
You know, if it becomes a full-time job, you are very fortunate. But for most people, it's full-time in the sense that whenever I'm needed, I will be there. Wherever I see a need, I will respond. So you're on call all the time.
So everything else I do in life for myself is at best a means to that ends.
And at worst, a dangerous habit that might turn into an addiction.
Do you think the world, the young world especially, is ready for that message?
That is a very big part of the Rebbe's teachings. Young people are idealistic. We're not giving them any outlet, any expression for that idealism. We treat them like helpless problems rather than the solution to many problems. Because what teenagers can do with their enthusiasm, with their energy, and with their idealism, change the world. So the Rebbe's message was always, challenge them, don't indulge them. Let me give you a quick story. This young boy went to summer camp, a conservative summer camp. I mean, conservative Judaism. And he discovered some things he never knew. He came home and he went to his rabbi and he said, Rabbi, we were observing Shabbat in camp. Now that I'm home, how can I continue observing Shabbat? Actually, he said, how can I keep Shomer Shabbat? How can I keep keeping Shabbos? The rabbi said, Do what is meaningful to you on Shabbat, and that will be your celebration. The boy left disappointed. In fact, he was quite upset. Came to Chabad house, and he told me the story. And he said, what do they pay him for? To tell me to do whatever I think is good? That's what I've done all my life. I don't need a rabbi to tell me that. You see, like two generations ago, when everybody's parents were Orthodox, it was exciting and interesting to be told you can do whatever you want. Do what you think. Wow, that was empowering. That was today. What are you telling children? Do what you think. Do what feels good for you. Do it. Hey, that's what I do all my life. Tell me something I need to know. In other words, he came to be challenged. And he was told to just be. That's not what teenagers need to hear.
Rabbi, one more question. If you had the ear of Mark Zuckerberg and you could convey to him a message, 60 seconds, what would you say to him?
I guess the first step would be to make him conscious of the fact that he is desperate for some purpose, direction, and ideal. Much more than he needs his friends' approval, much more than he needs to become a celebrity, much more than he needs to be loved, much more than he needs to have piercings. Once I can convince him of that, then the answer is simple. Serve your Creator. The hard part is, your life is not about you. They're so wrapped up in themselves. You got to really be smart to get through their defenses. It's my life. It's my body. No, it's not.
You know, I guess the fear is that what you're saying is so counterintuitive to history, to the biological composition of human beings, that people are afraid if you talk like that, they think you're crazy. You won't have any more friends.
But here's the real problem. That assumption that the biological is the real thing and serving God is for some people, but really not, it's the exact opposite. The biological has no meaning whatsoever. It is not the definer of truth. Our purpose tells us the truth, and that is the true nature. And our true instincts will tell us that. We've just been so distracted, and we've been fed the wrong message. So a healthy intuition will tell you that the biological is meaningless. The purpose is the real thing. So that very assumption is poison.
Finally, if we can conclude, and tonight, as we know, is the Chaf Beis Shvat, is the anniversary of the passing of Rebbe Tzimchaya Mushka, the wife of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, if you can just tell us a little thought or something that could encapsulate who she was.
That is very hard to do. Anyone who went to visit her came away humbled. She was so nice, she was so polite, she was so complimentary, and yet you walked away feeling like such a baby compared to her. A baby. She didn't make you feel stupid. She made you feel like an infant, like you haven't even begun to live yet. Everything about her was so bigger than life that it made even big people feel tiny. In a pleasant way. When she was, what was the word? In the court case with the books, she was, what was the word? Interviewed? Interrogated? Cross-examined? What was it?
Cross-examined, I guess.
What she said just disarmed everybody. Because when she said something, it was like, whoa, you can't ignore it. Every word was wise and strong and real and true. I forget exactly the detail, but somebody asked her, did you ever say something, some expression? Did you ever say that? And she said, once, concerning my father. And it was like, you know when you said it, how many times you said it, and exactly. We're all babies compared to that. We can't remember 3/4 of what we've said. So when she said, do your father's books belong to the Chassidim? She said, my father belonged to the Chassidim. And that was it. It was over. Case closed. That's it. She shut the whole thing down. Now, with anybody else, people's reaction would have been, oh, very cute. Whose books are they? But when she said it, people were just speechless. That's it. There was nothing they could say. Because when she spoke, it was with such truth, such authority, you couldn't argue with it. It's a rare thing. But when the reporter asked the Rebbe to say something about his wife, about the Rebbetzin, and the reporter said, we heard great things about her, the Rebbe said, I'm paraphrasing, you have no idea. You think you heard great things. You have no idea.
You know, Rabbi Friedman, it reminds me of a story with the Baal Shem Tov, where the Hasidim, the Talmidim, came to him and said, we really want to see Eliyahu Hanavi. You know, we want to see him. And the Baal Shem Tov pushed them aside. But again and again they asked, and they persisted, and they drove him crazy. And the Baal Shem Tov said, fine. Anyway, the story goes, it was some sort of bris and this and that, and there was a guy there making him a nuisance out of himself or whatever, and no one paid attention to him. That evening, they came to the Baal Shem Tov and says, no, where was Eliyahu Hanavi? They said, that guy, that guy. The point is that because we are so unholy, we wouldn't even recognize Eliyahu Hanavi even if we saw him. And I think that's what you're saying, and it's obviously testament to how special the Rebbetzin was and how, let's just say, ordinary, for lack of a better term, we are. That it's hard to describe, begin to describe the virtue of this person, of the Rebbetzin.
It's to the everlasting credit of the judge that he did see it. He recognized something. Judge Sifton.
Yeah.
It has been a pleasure.
Rabbi, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. It's always a pleasure. And we wish you well. And we wish your family well.
It was also helpful.
It was, very much. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. We'll be in touch.
Cheerio.
Take care.